So, welcome everyone to the last panel of our conference, Synesthesia in the 21st Century. Actually, for us at Art Laboratory Berlin, it's a really important and interesting theme. It's something that we're constantly thinking about, not only in the context of this series from its inception in 2010 with our open call up to this conference, but also in our plans for the future. I'm thinking of Marshall McLuhan saying that man forms the tool and then the tool forms man. It's something I come back again and again. I think as this whole idea of synesthesia and way it's come in the last 2 centuries again and again in the ideas of perception, in the history of perception, and through the I mentioned the 19th century, this idea of literacy coming up at the same time as synesthesia, and grapheme synesthesia being the most common form of synesthesia, and certainly also other forms, like the idea that in the 19th century, for the first time, a majority of the European populations read, went to theater, went to concerts, and exactly when this started to happen in the late 19th century, synesthesia emerged as a topic. This connection with cinema, which is also something, an art form, really the first art form that came about for everybody, for a mass public, and functioned also on a certain synesthetic and multimedia level. And in the last few decades, digital technologies, which have also functioned on this possibility of going between the audio and the visual, and adding these whole different levels. And at the same time, I think not enough it's happened so gradually over the last 25 years that not enough thought has really gone into how much new technologies change our brains, our brain structures, not just our perception, the fact that more and more of the world and more people in the world are spending more and more time in front of graphic user interfaces and really interacting with the world through this interface. And that's certainly just as the brain structure, the perception, the language abilities of a hunter-gatherer are different from a farmer, from a factory worker. Certainly people who, this interface here is changing the way we think, the way we perceive. And so I think this last panel really will bring up topics about synesthesia in the 21st century and how this multimediality, a digital multimediality, and the creation of devices and interaction with this interface and the different sensory levels and combinations of it will play a part. And it, maybe something that is less self-evident than we might be aware of. Sometimes I think the present has a tendency to sneak up on us as we're kind of looking backwards a lot, and then suddenly using ever newer tools to do so. The first talk will be Katharina Gsöllpointner. She was supposed to give this talk with Romana Schuler, but Romana is unfortunately ill. But I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to both of them. Romana wrote her dissertation on experimental perception in science and arts, and with an emphasis on Gsöllpointner in virtual reality. After that, she became instrumental in the development of the Leopold Museum Quarter in Vienna, and then also in the development and conception of the new Hermann Nitsch Museum and Museum Centrum Mistelbach as sole director. And since 2010, she's been lecturing on the history of experimental perception in the sciences and arts in the digital arts department at the University of Applied Arts in Vienna. Unfortunately, she can't be here today because she's ill, but she was going to give this talk together with Katharina Gsöllpointner, who is here. And Katharina is a media and art theoretician specialized in digital arts and media aesthetics. One of her latest works focuses on the research of cross-modal perception as well as intermediate transfers on language, media, and arts. As director of the Loop Institute for Systematic Media Research in Vienna, she conceived and managed a 3-year research project on language, media, and art, and a result has been published on different online projects such as Sprachmedium AT. In the 90s, she was also a manager and curator at Ars Electronica and is currently owner and director of the Institute for Systematic Media Research in Vienna. And she's going to talk about a new project she's doing with Romana, Digital Synesthesia, a transdisciplinary research project.
Okay, thank you, Chris, for this introduction. I just must make a small correction. It's Institute of Systemic Media Research, which is a crucial difference because it refers to my theoretical background of systems theory, which means that it's a bit different to what systemic observation of phenomena is. So, but I know most people just don't read it. They just see the word and they understand systematic, so it's systemic media research. But thank you very much for this nice introduction. Again, to everybody, sorry from Romana, unfortunately she's very ill. She would have loved to be here with us, but yeah, she can't really leave her bed. Thank you both, Regina and Chris, for the invitation to this really very, very interesting and very well done and senseful in both senses symposium. What I'm going to do this afternoon is a bit different from the other presentations we have had during the last 2 days, because I'm not going to present you any results from research, but I'm going to introduce a new research project we only have started last March, so that's 3 months ago. It's called Digital Synesthesia, and it is funded by the Austrian Science Fund, which has for a couple of years now a special research program which only focuses on artistic research. So this research program, it's abbreviated PEAK, deals with a new kind of transdisciplinary research, a thing artists and scientists have done before, have been doing before already, but now it's more or less in an official context and in an official frame. Still, the term artistic research is something which I consider very difficult, because it tries to match scientific and artistic rules with each other, and I think this is very difficult, especially referring to what I mentioned before, a systemic view of social of sociology, which differs very sharply between the science and the art system, for example, as between the political or the law system or the economic system. So, but this is just a very short thing to this term, artistic research. I have to get my glasses, otherwise I can't deal with the computer and the... So where are we? Okay. So I give you a short overview what I'm talking about. This is, first of all, what is digital synesthesia at all? What does this concept mean? I introduce you very quickly to the project and then introduce the group, because I think it's important that the group is a multi- and transdisciplinary group of artists and scientists. Then we have prepared a presentation on the topic art and synesthesia from a historical point of view, which would have done Romana. She's an expert on this. I'm going through this probably very quickly and come back to what is interesting for us, especially with the digital art in connection or in context of the topic synesthesia. So what is digital synesthesia? It's the project, as I mentioned before. We are conducting from last March until 2016, which means it will last 3 years. And it focuses on the possibilities of digital arts to provide synesthetic experiences for non-synesthetes. We underlined this topic, digital art, because I think it's important to make a distinction between all other kinds of all other media of art, and we underlined the synesthetic experiences for non-synesthetes, because I also would like to state that what's not so interesting for us is if the artists are synesthetes or not. This is not a point of interest for us. For us, the artistic works will be interesting to research. Further, the project focuses on the possibilities of the digital technologies to create translational and cross-modal experiences. So we had these expressions or these concepts of translation, of cross-modality, of I'll show you later which kinds of different expressions we have for this or we have heard during the last days for this topic, synesthesia, and I think this is also an important thing we would like to research in our project. What is the exact meaning of all these different expressions for synesthesia? Because the digital arts, that's one of our assumptions, may be able to show a more specific or may be able to propose a more specific concept in terms of what is really going on in synesthesia in a kind of mechanical or technological way with this transformation or translation or transgression of sensory modalities. Unfortunately, we don't have an internet connection here, which I only I've learned a few minutes ago. So I can't show you all of the short films I've prepared. This would have been one, but I think some of you or most of you know this project. The interactive plant growing from 1993. Are there some people who have seen it already or have experienced it? Okay, not so many, but a few of you. So I would have liked to show you a short film, but maybe I'm just explaining it. It's an interactive media installation by Christa Sommerer and Laurent Mignonneau. And in the 90s, you know, there was this big topic of the interface design of interactive installations. How can you design interfaces for computers or other machines to be as suitable as possible for our human bodies, you know, as occurring to our senses and our possibilities of getting in touch with machines. So there was a large area of interface research, and Christa Sommerer and Laurent Mignonneau were one of the very important artists who did this. They still do it. And this interactive plant growing worked that you had living plants as an interface. So you had different palm trees and cactuses, how do you say? And so, and you could touch them, and while touching them and striking them or whatever, you would activate the computer program, which showed on the screen, which you can see here behind, also growing plants. But it was, of course, these were calculated. It was algorithmic calculated plants, animations of plants. But for us, this is a very, very nice and a very typical example for how synesthetic experiences can be provided by these kind of interactive, time-based installations. You have at the same time, you have before all the haptic sense where you're touching the plants and where you really can, strike them and get in touch with them. And on the other hand, you have this, of course, the visual impression of the growing plants, but still you have also the kinesthetic sense in it when the plants are growing, and you also have to move around the plants when touching them. So it's a multi-modal installation, and I think they really got their point then with this artwork. What digital interactive work or media or artworks can provide for us as multisensory experiences. So as I mentioned before, the project is an artistic research project, which means that we try to integrate, or we don't just try, but we will integrate artists, scientists, scholars in a research group, and to develop together the project objectives or the project aims, which will be artworks which provide these the research or the object sorry, I don't remember the word now. Maybe I go on with these artistic research definition. Why we think that artistic research is important in our context is that for us artists are the experts for aesthesis for perception. They are the ones who always dealt with aesthetics, as we know. They always dealt with synesthetics. So we think that artists are in a research project on synesthesia. They're very, very important to be included, and particularly when it deals with synesthetics. And we also think that the digital technologies offer new conditions to the aesthetic practice and artistic processes. Other technologies did in a different way, or only have in a different way. Our main assumptions are that, and this is still, we're still discussing these assumptions. We are not quite convinced on all of them. But it's one possibility to see the digital code, the binary code, functioning as a technological translation program. That's why I asked Madi before if she has an algorithm in her work, because this would be, of course, a completely different thing. And many artworks, of course, deal with this, that they translate in an algorithmic way, just, for example, visual information into sound information. I will show you something in the end. I will show you a project as an example. But still, it is something which I think is important, the binary code and the algorithmic programs of the digital media, which makes a difference to all the other artistic media. Another assumption is that we think that only time-based digital artworks provide the possibility of producing simultaneously multimodal perceptual impressions. Another assumption is that digital artworks produce synesthetic and cross-modal translations, which sounds very simple, but still has to be proven or researched. And we also think that all senses can be addressed and activated simultaneously by digital artworks in a special way, of course. So in the beginning, I think it's very important that we make differentiations and a definition of the the difference of all these conceptions we've heard during the last days. Like, what's the difference, or what's the meaning of synesthesia in terms of cross-modality? How has it to do with the sensory correspondence? What's the difference between sensory associations and synesthesia, for example, or is it the same, or is it just part of it? Also the transmodal integration of senses. I think Hindag Emrich mentioned this expression yesterday. The translation of sensory modalities. And then, last but not least, the language and image metaphors. So this is something we will also focus on. There's still no work done, but I think mentioning it is important to be able to go on this project. Our questions are, in what form do digital artworks translate perception modalities from image, sound, and text to other sensory modalities? So we reduce the media we want to use to image, sound, and text, because we also chose artists who are focusing on these media, and we think they are experts on these. So we had to reduce them a little bit for our research concept. Yeah, here we have the 5 main senses. I also would like to mention, it has been mentioned today, of course there are many more. I think Agnieszka, you mentioned the proprioception, and then we have of course the kinesthetic sense, which is very important, the sense of moving my body in space, and there are many other senses. I think there are around 20 or so, which we don't think about. We have the sense of sensing our organs, for example. You can really feel your heartbeat, but also you can feel your stomach, you can feel your digestion and everything. You can't control it, but you can. So there are many senses, but the main 5 senses, of course, are the ones we are also focusing on. We are also interested, also coming from my language media research background, in metaphors. They can be image metaphors, but of course they can also text or language metaphors. What sensory modalities are mainly addressed? This, I think, is also very interesting, because I think that digital arts or interactive arts are mainly focused on the visual senses, or apparently focused on the visual senses, but still I think, as we have seen at Christa and Laurent's project, they always have to do with the haptic sense. Touching my computer, I always have haptic and kinesthetic senses to be used. The research process itself is something we want to observe all the time and change it due to what's coming up on new information or new knowledge. We have, of course, different media we are using. At the moment we are establishing a website. Of course, we have a wiki. We will have workshops, face-to-face things. We may have a symposium. We will have lectures, guest lectures, and so on. So different kind of medias to design this artistic research process. Yes, and the multidisciplinary team. Furthermore, we want to research the perception of digital artworks. First, they have to be produced, of course. One of the main objectives, of course, is the production of around approximately 18 artworks. It can be a little bit less, a bit more, by around 12 artists. And these artworks, of course, will be presented in an exhibition at the end of the research project, hopefully in Europe and in Hong Kong, because one of our cooperations is with the Hong Kong University, the Media Art School. Each of the artworks should address at least 2 of the sensory modalities. and it should show some cross-modality or transformation from image to sound and or text. And a very small, you can't read this, a very small objective still is, but here we are really looking for cooperation partners, so if somebody of you thinks they could be interested, we are very gladful. We would like to do a small empirical study on the difference of the perception of the artworks in Asian and European context, or by Asian and European recipients. I think there was some topic yesterday about somebody asked someone, I don't remember now, if it would be interesting to have there a research thing, and this is something we would like to do, and so if somebody of you is interested in this, I'm very glad to hear about it. We can talk about it afterwards. Well, the group is, as I said before, we consist of 2 scholars, me and my colleague. She's an art historian focusing on the technological and aesthetic backgrounds of perception in arts and sciences. I'm a media theoretician. And then we have a large group of artists, Jeffrey Shaw, one of the pioneers of interactive art, Ruth Schnell, who is the professor at our Department of Digital Art in the University of Applied Arts, where we are based. Peter Weibel, who is also one of the pioneers of electronic and digital art. And then we are collecting a number of young artists we still have to name, and we're still looking for who would be interested in collaborating with us. 2 or 3 I will introduce to you later, so that it's just a few examples. And of course then we will have guests, neurologists, cognitive psychologists and philosophers to get a really transdisciplinary group of researchers. So, well, this is now what Romana would have talked about. She's as I said before, she's an expert on the history of art and synesthesia in terms of technological contexts. So I just skip this now. I go through it very shortly, very slowly. So maybe if there are any questions to the pictures, and if you have any questions, please ask. I might try to answer them. But I think most of you know what I'm showing. These are the Kandinsky color studies. She would have started with this. Then she would have given a short overview what's going on in the what was going on in the 60s, especially. First, of course, about synesthesia as a new phenomenon, but we have heard a lot about it during the last days already. Then she would have shown a few examples about illusions, which we also have seen already. And now she would have given a short overview about only a few important influences in the 60s of artworks addressing all senses, which I have to admit I can't tell you a lot about it. It's of course kinetic art was very important because it dealt with the kinesthetic sense and with the visual sense, and she would have shown you a few examples about artworks which may be not so well known as others. Has any one of you recognized one of these? Yeah? Which one? This one? Can you tell us 3 words about it? No, okay, thank you. No, it's okay. Well, then she would have introduced the three pioneers of electronic arts we have in our group. First one is Geoffrey Shaw. He's the one who is now in Hong Kong. He's director of this media school in Hong Kong. And one of his really, really famous and most influential works was the Legible City. Some of you may also know it. Yeah, the artist amongst you. This is one video I would like to have shown to you, but however, these two pictures show you, one is the installation view, respectively the screen of an installation where, you had a screen where you saw the movie, and in front of the screen there was this bicycle seat with the it was a bicycle you could step on and ride it, and in front of the bicycle you had this map of a city. It was, I think it was Amsterdam. I'm not sure if it's Amsterdam on this picture, but it was Amsterdam. And then you could start riding on your bike through Amsterdam, see on the map where you are, and at the same time you moved by the buildings of the city. I mean, this was 80, when was it? It was 88 and 91. So it was a very early stage of interactive art. You had to use a lot of huge computers to be able to do this in real time. But the interesting point of the whole thing is that the city consisted of letters, of 3D letters, so and words. So you rode your bicycle through Amsterdam, through the buildings of Amsterdam, but they didn't consist of like, they didn't look like houses or whatever, but they looked like words and letters. So the synesthetic experience in this case would be like that you could experience a text as a three-dimensional space by moving your body. You had to do some sports to ride the bike, and could choose the direction you were going. So at least it were three senses: then the visual sense, the kinesthetic sense, and the tactile or haptic sense. Because of course your fingers, you had to hold the bike, and you had to be aware of your hands, of your tactile sense. Yeah. So if you have any questions in between, just ask, please. Geoffrey Shaw has before done a lot of, he has also done already inflatable objects in the 60s, where he was dealing very much already with the sensual model, with the different sensual impressions you have when, for example, you enter such an inflatable object which is moving. You could touch the rubber walls and things. So he was always very much interested in a multi-model, in a providing of multi-model artworks. And some time he also dealt with the topic of illusion. As we can see here, he projected 2D projections into a space, which then looked like a 3D object. This is an artwork by Ruth Schnell, the other pioneer of electronic arts. This one looks not so much as an interactive artwork, but it is. It's a picture hanging on a wall. It looks like a monochrome painting, which has a very small slit in the middle. And in the slit there you have LED light bulbs. And when you pass the picture, you suddenly see some text emerging from the slit. Ruth here is dealing with this phenomenon of after image, which you probably know all. If you are, for example, trying to watch or observe a star at night, you must not see it or look at it directly, but you have to look a bit on the side to see it, because our eyes are not able to focus so far on this spot on this spot we want to see. And a similar thing is, but I think our cognitive scientists or neurologists can explain this much better, that we always have we can have an after image looking at certain light sources. So if you know this experience, when you look at the red light and then you look away, then you see it suddenly you have a green after image in your eye. And this is a similar process, moving away or moving along this slit. Suddenly emerges a text you only see when you're moving, when you're turning your head. You can't focus on it and you can't read anything. And it works that, like, she has a computer program where she programs the single LED bulbs so fast that these words are produced, but only be seen when you pass the picture. So in some way it is an interactive artwork, because you have to interact in the way that you move your head and that you pass the artwork. It's called Sprache sehen, seeing language, which I think is a very nice title. This is a similar work which I would like to have shown you a video on, where she's talking about it herself. It's called plop, which is an expression of a sound expression of hearing a sound. And this picture shows you different expressions from comics, for example, bloop and sound and plop and ouch and things you wouldn't mention in an orderly language. Sorry, I can't show you the video. This is also a work from Peter Weibel, an early work which is called Hör zu, listen. And I can't explain it to you because that's also Romana's part. But you see that he's projecting musical, do you say notes? Musical notes on, scores on pictures of the ear. So the score itself goes directly into, more or less goes directly into the ear. This is another work he was doing very early, from 87, or is it 90? No, 67. He conceived it already 67, and he conducted it then, 2007, where he is also working with the, maybe it's interesting for you, Gertrud, also with the language and representation of language in art, in visual, or in this case in interactive art, like the wood, Holz means wood, and then this interaction, this installation switches between the image of the wood, or of a tree, of the wood, and the word wood. And the same with the green on the floor, with the grass, and the same with the, what's there on there's also green on top, but maybe there's also some blue on top, I'm sure. Yeah, this is some more about it. So, and these are the young artists now. This is a project from by Ulla Rauter. She is an alumni of the University of Applied Arts. She only finished her studies, I think, 2 years ago. And she developed a light piano. Of course, this is referring to what we heard yesterday, Scriabin's color pianos and so on. But here also I would like to have shown you 2 small videos, preferably one which shows her performing the whole the light piano, because it shows very, very nicely how she uses the a computer screen as a sensor for the light impacts which come out from the piano. You can see it on the left picture, on the left image. See this light coming out from the piano while she's playing, and the computer screen is established with a sensor which gets this information and translates it into sound then. So she is playing the piano just with the light, and the light inputs are by an algorithm via the computer translated into beautiful, beautiful sound. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't show you this video. She's building all these things herself. She's doing, she's conceiving it, she's building the instruments, and of course she's performing herself. There is another thing, another project which is similar to this. It's the fingertip vocoder, which refers me personally a bit of Laurie Anderson's vocoder performances. But this is different because she doesn't use the violin string, but she uses the fingertips. She has produced some golden or brass fingertip, like, yeah, it looks like, was heißt Fingerhut? Huh? Thimbles, yeah, it looks like thimbles, pointed thimbles on her fingers, and she can control with the thimbles, she can control the output of her voice. Yeah. Then there is a project which I'm not sure, I think it was Caro who was talking about the smell thing today. Where is she? Do you know it, the smeller? Oh, you're, okay, so you tell us. It's a very young, a very new project. It only was presented, I think, a few months ago, or a few weeks ago for the first time. Yeah. Yeah.
To present an olfactory film. Like, he built a machine which is like 3 times 2 times 10 meters and weighs over a ton, and is like it is able to project smells into a room. The smells can be controlled digitally by MIDI signals, and the viewer or the smeller is able to receive a smell every 2 seconds, because there is a constant airflow going through the room, and is like goes outside the room at the end of the room. So there's a constant
smell.
Yeah, I mean, like, there is a smell, and then the next smell is there 2 seconds later. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So these smells can be controlled with the keyboard we saw, or they can be programmed for the film. They were synchronized with colors, which were projected on a screen, and with sound. He composed with with other composers, and yeah, it works.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have not seen it yet, but I think it's really, and I also would have shown you the internet site, because you have a lot of pictures where you see this huge installation and everything is. So if you go on smeller.net, then you find all the information about it, and I think it's amazing. I mean, it's a research thing of, I think, almost 20 years or so. He has developed it. 12, yeah, okay. So, but I think this is very interesting, because I just wrote smelling and seeing, but thank you for the description, thank you very much. There's also sound involved, and there is also, of course, again, the kinesthetic sense involved, because you have to move in the space where you get the smell. You can go closer or further or farther, and that's kind of going in the direction of a time? Okay. Of a Gesamtkunstwerk. Okay. 1 minute? Okay. So another one, I think it's the last one now, is also by Christa Sommer and Laurent Mignonneau, which I think is a very important artwork. That the Life Writer, I don't know if some of you know it, I also would have shown you the video. This is an old typewriting machine where you type a text, and instead of the letters, you get small bugs on the screen. The paper is projected on the projected screen. You get small bugs who start running around on the screen, on the piece of paper, and the more you type, of course, the more bugs you got. And you can also, like in this very old school way, or old-fashioned way, you can turn the how do you say, die Rolle, die Walze von der Schreibmaschine. You remember anybody who ever wrote a typewriter? The roller, and if you turn it and you kill the bugs, yeah, you really smashed them. So that's a very haptic and tactical experience also, you know. You are, on the one hand, you're writing, but you see this digital movie, more or less, which is interactive, of course, because the moment you write, you're producing new life, more or less. So that's why it's called Life Writer. Well, and at the end, just one last, in difference to what you showed us today, this is a kind of, we all know, we see all the time, an algorithmic piece which is directly translating visual information into sound information. It's by Rainer Kohlberger. It's visual animation, huge installation, and colors and sounds are corresponding, and he's producing a kind of space where you also can immerse and just feel all your senses. Okay, thank you very much. This is our website forthcoming, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Katharina. Maybe one question from my point before we go on. I was wondering, are these projects, the 18 projects, things that are already started, or are they newly things being commissioned? And if they're there, in other words, if they're ideas that are coming out of this project instead of already existing ones, are you going to integrate artists working together, for instance, with neuroscientists? Or
yes. Yeah. That's what is a very important part of it. Artists, scientists, scholars work together. We really want to develop the artworks together, but of course artists are the ones who are making it then. But it shall be a common thing.
Okay. I'm sure there's some questions here in the audience. Yasu?
As a computer scientist, I'm interested in the your background or the background of the or theoretical background of the algorithms and digital art. What maybe you have spoken about the synesthetical background of your project, but maybe you have not yet mentioned about the algorithmic, what you are meaning in algorithm and digital art in your research. Maybe there were some exhibitions. For example, in 2005, there was an exhibition in Karlsruhe, Algorithmische Revolution. And also there is already some discussion about the digital art and algorithms for the art by Max Benze, which has been mentioned yesterday by Birgit Schneider. And so in your project, are you following such theory, or you are trying to found new theory of the such digital art and so synesthesia? So because so my interest is as computer scientist, what is meant algorithm in your research project? Huh? Algorithm, yes, which can be used only for the translation, or is the aesthetic of the algorithms?
I think I know what you mean. I think that's what we will be researching on. On the one hand, I think it's something which makes it easy to translate the information from one modality to another, but also I do think it has an aesthetic impact, or can have an aesthetic impact, depending on how you conceive or design this algorithm. And I think this is this is one part which I consider important for our research project. But it's not the only one. The other one is really what is different in digital arts, and there might be, or I'm sure there might be, the algorithm is one element of it. What is different in digital arts from other art media, and what makes them possible to provide time-based experiences, multimodal or multisensory experiences.
Only as American, or how can I say, so American, I would like to say, George Ligeti said, I'm composing computer music without computer, and in this context, so using algorithm and algorithmic thinking is not the same thing, no? Maybe if such thing is also considered in your project, it might be very interesting. So I wanted to say only.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Okay. Gertrude.
Yes, so I have also a question to the algorithm. I mean, I'm not really focusing on digital art as being digital. So on some level it seems that it's, I mean, the question of the code, and a code that allows for multiple translations into different media that are based on different sensorical capacities. And so still for me the question is, I mean, let's say when we discuss it in terms what was coming up several times during the conference, when we try to, I mean, describe it in processes of creation or creativity or production or whatever you prefer. So what role the algorithm plays here? So I mean, what would be the idea of the sketch, let's say, how you imagine an outcome, or is it really a kind of playing with different code? Is it a mathematical play? That has different visualizations, or I mean sensifications. So I'm still not so sure what is really at the base. I mean, is let's say the coding and encoding process in itself the work would be, I mean, let's say the code itself the work, or is it a kind of built on a language model where the code would be just a structure that enables performative utterances. And then one could say, well, you know, wouldn't be a time to do a kind of performative turn in digital art. So what would be really, I mean, the role of the code and the algorithm, which, I mean, was for a specific time very important to be linked with mathematics when you think of the Kittler school and so. So, but would this be really at the base of aesthetic productions? So I'm not sure, I have no idea. You should do the research.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's exactly, I mean, I agree with you absolutely, and I have to admit I'm not sure about it myself now, and I think this is one part of the research process which may come to a result. Maybe it's, like, I also can imagine it's both. It will be both still. It can be some translational code which makes things easier or faster even, or easier simultaneously experienceable. And on the other hand, it can also be a very aesthetic and language-based aesthetic technology, and being more or less being art itself, more or less. Well, but I'm not sure about it, and I'm as I said in the beginning, we the first assumption I mentioned that the digital code is an easy translational program. We have to discuss it.
Can I go further?
Yeah, sure.
So, I mean, you know, my experience from more phenomenological experiences, that it's very rare, at least in film, a bit different in music, that the artists are those who are developing the code. I mean, when you look at even somebody like Alexander Kluge, sure, he has an engineer who is doing the programming for him. So he says what he has, you know, he gives a kind of sketch, saying what the direction is, what he wants, and then it's a kind of trial and order thing. So they would try this coding systems and so. So I wonder, I mean, what is really, I mean, let's say the imaginary function in developing these codes, and yeah, so I mean, if you really look at into the production. So
yeah, I mean, I only can.
I mean, most filmmakers doing digital editing, and very rarely they can do it by themselves. Usually they have electronic, I mean, really expert cutters who are, I mean, doing the machine.
Well, with Christa Sommer and Laurent Mignonneau, I know exactly he and she, they call themselves artists. Also, he's the one who's programming, and she's doing more or less the other things. But they're together, they're conceiving the whole project. And of course, her thoughts come into his program, and he says programming is an artistic process, and it is something which is very creative, of course, but it is artistic.
Yeah, maybe to start some research in this direction might be interesting, very simple, but interesting to do some classification first, and also to work out a classification scheme. What means algorithmic, what type of algorithms were used to summarize the history of digital arts, and just to look into the black box, or to try to look into the black box, and then see what was used in also on that range of I am a composer with the computer, but I'm not do algorithmic composing and so, and just see what has been done. And
yes, of course this exists. I know this.
But
I think the really interesting point is that we are going to do this together in this group, and we will discuss it a lot. And at the end, they have to come out some artworks, and we'll see if it's necessary, or it will be necessary to have these definitions before or not. I don't know. I think it's important, as you said. And these things exist, of course, and we have to find our own point of view. But as we are a group, it's not just me.
Okay, maybe 2 more questions, because we're a bit tight in time, or maybe one more question. Pinar. And then for other questions, maybe at the final discussion, we can come back and...
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I really like the idea and what you're trying to do with this research center for multimodal aesthetic experiences that embraces digital arts. It's amazing. I want to go back to your previous slides, actually, where you talked about the definition of like digital synesthetic experiences, and you said that, I mean, maybe you didn't say it, but I read it on the screen, that only time-based artworks would be considered digitally synesthetic. And my first question, digitally synesthetic, I just made it up, but you know, synesthetic in the sense that you're in the context of your research. So I'm just thinking about, you know, what time-based really means, because everything is temporal. Our perception happens on a temporal basis, and even things that are traditionally considered like unmoving, such as painting, there's always some kind of movement in time. So I would just like to hear what you think about that. Also, again, as one of your principles for the center, you mentioned that the idea is to bring synesthetic experiences to non-synesthetes, and I was just thinking, also as a student of the brain, whether it's possible, you know, to make non-synesthetes, like normal people, experience what, you know, these individuals, these special individuals experience. Like, again, this is kind of like a theoretical or maybe a materialist question, because I'm like, whoa, would that be even possible, you know, to like have a different experience of the world without drugs and having the, you know, necessary network in my brain. So I'd like you to hear what you know, exactly, or what you're actually thinking when you say that.
Yeah, second question, yes, I think it's possible to oh, sorry. Second question, yes, I think it's possible to theoretically it is possible, we'll see. And the first question was time-based, yeah. Time-based is this expression, you know, of digital media who are presenting works who only function in the time, in an interactiveness, in time. I mean, a painting, we know everything is, of course, it's always moving, there's always time, but it's an expression for a kind of artworks that digitally based and work in time. So you have to, it's movies, videos, interactive installations, that's what I mean.
A short reaction. I'm not a synesthete. I had a genuine synesthetic experience in an installation. It was incredible. It was an installation with vibration, light, and sound, all calibrated, all synchronized. I was lying on a platform that was vibrating, and I saw, felt, and heard a similar one shape. And I cannot say if I was feeling it or hearing it or seeing it, because it wasn't any of those senses anymore. It was something in between. And it was a beautiful experience. The installation is called Displace. Displace, and it travels the world. And afterwards, when people come out of this installation, there's a sensory anthropologist asking you questions about your background and your experiences. So these data will be used to see if there's a difference in perception when you're from a different culture. Yeah. The artist It was Ted's. It was Chris Salter and David House, and I did the smells.
Okay, Katharina, thank you very much.
Thank you.